So let's get right into it, my friends. Let me pull you down. I have brought out a few examples, just a few, because a ladder is truly one of my favorites to design. And although the technique is the same, we can use different types of closures, right, and get a completely different look on a ladder style, right? So I'll start with this one right here. Okay, so this one is all check glass and it just has a simple magnetic closure, right? And I'm using bead stringing wire on this one, right? And this is just all beautiful. These are some probably fours. I think these are 4mm drucks and some beautiful 8mm check melons there. Okay, and that is crimped and a magnetic closure with some bead stringing wire. So there's that way. And then here's another way we can utilize this beautiful technique with, this is S-line cord. So this is some S-line cording and some beautiful Unakite gemstones in the middle there, which is some beautiful threes, maybe 4mm rondelles there, and a beautiful button closure, right? So we've got this one. And what I like about this style is that you can really expand this beaded loop, such as I did, to really showcase the beads, right? At the end, you can also leave room for dangles here. And it's just a really cool look. So it's not quite symmetrical on either side at the ends there, right? But it still works. It's just the intention of the design. But it completely, the same technique turns out a little bit different here, right? This beauty is similarly, I used some cording. This one I used some knotting cord, which is 0.8mm in a beautiful tan here. And I just pulled a really fun vintage bead out of my stash. It's probably like a 14mm. And I used the bead as my closure. So another really fun way to close off a ladder, but it is the same technique, but looks totally different. Another one that I have is this beauty. I love this one. This I made with my last year June sparkle bag, which was Seashores. And so that's some beautiful flower amazonite. And I used some waxed cording, some wax knotting cord and a 0.8mm here, and use this cool link in the center, right? And that's how that one looks. And then I tied my knots directly on the magnetic clasp here. So I have no jump rings or any other findings on that one. The other thing I want to point out is what's really fun about a ladder is you can really mix up the end result. It's according to how many small beads we put on the outside of the ladder, right? So you'll notice that here, like this one, they are spaced out with 3 4mm rondelles. So there's a little bit of space in between, right? This one has 4, but these are probably 3.5s, right? So there's a little bit more space between the steps. We'll call them the steps of our ladder, the middle bead there, right? So there's a little bit more dimension. So more skin will show through, right? And then here I made it much tighter, right? So I did just 2, these are probably 4mm in between those flower amazonite. So the ladder, the stairs there on the ladder are much tighter, right? So there's a lot of fun that you can have with this technique once you get it down. I just love a ladder. So there are some samples. We're going to get into making something very similar to this one here today. So the supplies I am working with today, my friends, are some 0.8mm waxed knotting cord. And I have this in this bright neon yellow. You can use any cording. You could also switch this out for bead stringing wire or tiger tail, whatever you've got. For your cording, some regular knotting cord. You could use monofilament. You could change this up, right? But we're going to use this beautiful, fun color, because this will go for spring and summer. Okay, and I'll show you what I did to get started here. And I cut, I'd say, probably about 24 inches. So the one thing about a ladder I would recommend is you want to cut your stringing material, cut twice as much as you think you need, because we do lose a little bit of cord as we're doing the ladder, right? So as we are doing the ladder with the step beads in between, right, we lose a little bit of wire. So I always like to have a little more than less. And also, choosing a beautiful color to match your beads in a design like a ladder or a goddess, for example, is really, really fun. So I chose this color because it's just gonna really pop. There's a lot of this cording that will show through subtly here and there, right? So that's why I chose that. So this is 0.8 millimeter wax knotting cord. I do have a button, and it's a fun daisy. It's a shank button. So your beaded loop will depend upon what size button you have. I have these really fun polymer clay beads, and then I have the 8 millimeter rondelles. We're going to use these for the steps in our ladder, right? The middle section. So we'll just call that our steps, right? And you'll want to use a bead that has a hole big enough that whatever cording or stringing material you're using will pass through your beads twice, right? So these all have a hole that will allocate for me to pass my cording through twice. So that's why I chose these beads, and these are 8 millimeters. And then over here I have what's going to go on the outside are the 4 millimeter rondelles and the 6 millimeter rondelles. I chose these. This is a mix I had, but these are 6 millimeters, and I picked out some pretty whites with that AB on it. I think that matches pretty back to the flowers, and then just some pretty yellows. And then, of course, my friends, the only other thing you're going to need is really just your hands. We'll definitely be using our hands as our tool today. You can use some regular cutting scissors or your cutter tool to cut your cording. You will also need a lighter or a thread burner and a beading needle, or use some bead stringing wire such as I have here. I just cut a piece about 4 inches of beading wire and fold it in half to have a makeshift needle. Really handy little trick in case our cord gets fussy to go through any of our beads. We can always rely on that. So to start out, if you're going to use some cording, you'll want to prepare your ends by cutting them on a very sharp angle here, where it almost looks like a self needle there, right? So you'll want to kind of cut that on the end on an angle, and that's going to just help it to go through our beads. You can also put a lighter to make it easier to get through, and it won't keep fringing on you, right? If you're using bead stringing wire, you'll be able to get it through probably just fine. So I prepared my ends of my cord, and then I folded it in half, right? Did that. And then what I did was I strung on 14 4 millimeters here in this pearl, this yellow pearl luster. So there's 4 millimeters, and there's 14. So that amount, that count, the amount of beads that you want to start with, right? Because this is going to be our beaded button closure, right? Just depends on what size button that you have. And so I just strung on as many as I needed to go through my button. So that might vary depending upon what size beads you use on your loop or what size your button is. Okay, so for this, I have 14, and all I did was just string them on. And now I'm ready to continue my ladder. In this particular design, I'm going to be using 2 4 millimeters on either side and 1 6 millimeter in between. I think I'll start with the yellow. I'm going to go back and forth between the yellow and the white. I'll start with the white. So I will be using 3 beads on either side, and then I'm going to be using these guys. So we'll see, I have about 10 of them out. So I'm going to go back and forth just like this on the bracelet, right? And this, again, we'll count them at the end. There's not an exact science because it's just going to depend on the size beads that you're putting in your ladder. So it'll turn out different depending upon, you know, how much you're putting on the outside, how many beads are you gonna end up needing in the middle there, right? That'll vary from bracelet to bracelet, just depends on what you're using. So let's just get the technique down. So now that I've prepared my cording and strung on my 14 beads to start to make my loop, the very next thing I'm gonna do is grab my first center step bead for the center, right? And what I'm gonna do is, so I've got my cording in half, right? So let me pull you guys out a little bit so you can kind of see what I'm doing here, and then I'll pull you in a minute. So the first thing that we want to do is we're going to put our cording through the bead going from left to right, and then the left cording I'm going to put going from right to left and then left to right. So now essentially this is what I have. I have a cord coming out the bead going opposite directions, right? And I'm just gonna go ahead, I'm gonna kind of try to keep them as close as I can to being married up here. I'm gonna hold those and I'm gonna pull this bead down until it stops. And that's what I have to get started. Okay, now I'm going to go back and forth on each piece of my cording with a 4mm and then a 6mm and then a 4mm. This now begins our ladder. And then we will grab the other side and do the same exact thing. And now again, this is the count that I've given you here. I'm doing 1 4mm, 1 6mm, and 1 4mm. You can change that up depending upon how wide you want the steps on your ladder to be, as I was just showing you on my sample pieces, right? So in other words, get those pulled down. In other words, if you want less space, just put like maybe 2 beads in between. If you're using like 11 O's or some tiny seed beads, some 8 O's, anything like that, 6 O, 8 O, 15 O, 11 O, anything like that, or even some small 2mm spacers, you can just get away with doing 3, and then you might have a tighter step in your ladder. If you want more dimension in between your beads, more space, right? So like this, that therefore more skin will show through, right? Then you put more beads on the outside, okay? So that's just a design preference. We'll just get the technique down today. And so I've got those pulled down, and that's what I have, okay? And now I'm gonna do the same thing I just did with that white bead, but I'm gonna now use my flower. So I'm gonna take one cord, put it through my bead, going from right to left. And then I'm gonna take the other cord, go through my bead, going from left to right. And then I'm gonna kind of grab the ends here and pull that bead on down. And that's what I have. So you can kind of see the spacing I'm going to have already taking shape there. It's kind of a medium space in my steps here, right? Okay, so we're just gonna repeat this all the way down, and then I'll pull you in for a few runs here, and I'll fast forward and then show you how we are gonna finish off the end with the button. So I'm gonna be using a 4, a 6, and a 4. And so now we'll go with maybe the yellow. And this is why I cut so much cording, right? Because if it starts fraying on me, we have to trim it. And then we'll do another 4. pull those down, and then I will grab the other cording, and we'll grab 2 of the 4s and 1 of the 6s. And we'll get those fed on here. Get those pulled down. And now, because I'm alternating my beads in the center here, I now need to grab the 8mm rondelle in that white AB finish. So I'm going to grab my cord, put it through my bead going in one direction, and then the other cord needs to go through the bead in the opposite direction. And so that's what we have. Right, and then I'll pull that down. Okay, and then we'll do that one more time. It's pretty straightforward. It's a really beginner-friendly design. Very beginner-friendly design. And I just love this style because there's so much we can do with it, but it's so unique, and when you're wearing it, it's just so beautiful. It really draws the eye. I get so many compliments when I'm wearing the ladders. I truly do. It's just such a unique, beautiful style of jewelry. And I thought we would have fun with a beautiful ladder and utilizing some cording here. It's very lightweight. It's gonna wear lovely on the wrist. Very, very whimsy, and a great spring and summer style of bracelet with the cording. I need 1 more 4mm here. And then we will grab now for our flowers, and we'll put that through and go in the opposite direction. And then we'll go ahead and pull that on down. And you can see that's really starting to take shape now. So cute. And you see, can you tell how there's going to be some subtle cording showing through at the steps in our ladder there, right? The other thing I want to show you and point out really quick, I'm just going to keep repeating this, guys. I'll fast forward here to the end, and then I'll show you how we're going to close this up with the button today. But the other thing I do want to mention on this tutorial with the specific technique is if you need to tighten this up, what you're going to want to do is, it's going to be really easy on the cording, but if you're using bead stringing wire, it is necessary for you to tighten your ladder sections up about every 2 to 3 that you're feeding on. And what I usually do is, like, I'll do about 2 to 3, and then I'll go and back it up to see, do I need to tighten anything up? And how I do that is literally going directly to the outside ladder beads here, and I'll pull them, right? And that's gonna, like, pulling that, do you see how that kind of took some slack out right here on my, right here, right? And then now to tighten up the next section, you grab those beads next to that white rondelle, same thing. I'll grab those and I'll pull them, right? And now that tightened up the section below it, right? And then I'll do the same thing up here. Once I pull these, it tightened up this section. And now I can pull out much more slack. Right, I'm all done stringing up my ladder. Let me show you guys what I have and pull you tight in here. And we'll finish this beauty up with my cute little daisy shank button. I just wanted to go over my ladder one more time. If you want to use some similar sizing of beads, this is what this is going to look like, right? And now again, this might be different for everybody, depending upon not only the beads you're using, but also the size of your wrist, right? And the desired amount of skin you want showing through. again, remember how I was mentioning, you know, the tighter your steps, this middle bead, in your ladder that you want it to be, that's the less skin that's going to show through, the tighter, the less beads we're going to put on the outside. And it also just depends on what size beads you're putting on the outside, like all of the samples, right, that I was showing you. So there's another glimpse at just using the same technique, how we can get a totally different design out of the exact same technique by switching up the count of our beads and the size of our beads and our closure, right? And of course also the type of material that we're using. So just a beautiful, fun, super beginner friendly design. And so I have 11, and these are all 8 millimeters. The white rondelles and the polymer clay flowers, those are all 8s, right? And then I have the 4 millimeters, right? I have 14 4 millimeters, and now I have a 17 millimeter button. So if you have a 17 millimeter button, and you're going to use 4 millimeters, I have 14, right? And then I used a 4 and a 6 and a 4 on the outside. And I just alternated my colors. I put the little pop of that fun opaque yellow in the front there, in the front. I beat up center, right? And so the other thing I'm going to do, my friends, is I am going to permalac, right? So there's the permalac, and it is in the semi-gloss. So I'm going to permalac the only metal that I have on this design so that I can wear this for years to come on my button, right? Because it's just brass underneath that antique silver color. Okay, so we'll permalac that as well. But I did want to show you also how to finish this up, right? So after your last step bead, which is our center, right? Usually I'll put, it just depends on my length that I need. But I want to finish up with my smaller beads that are similar to what I started with. Typically that's what I do. So let's see, and how many we don't know, but we're about to find out. Just depends on your length. So I'm gonna put on 2. Okay, so in other words, friends, we don't wanna finish with the step bead. We wanna finish with the outside of the outside ladder beads. That's what we wanna do on a ladder style, right? You don't wanna end with your middle beads, you wanna end with your outside beads. And in order to determine how many of those you need, it's really about sizing, right? So just feed on, you know, like a couple of your smaller beads, and then just put it around your wrist and take a look and see where you need to be. And I think really, I could probably get away with 1, to tell you the truth, because I still need to put my button on here, right? So I'm probably good with having just 1 on each side. Right? So that would be different for everybody. Now, if I wanted to back this out, this white bead, right, that white rondelle, I could do that as well. That's another option to finish off your ladder with your cording. If I wanted to, because you can see where I'm at for sizing here, right? So if I wanted to have a ton of these yellow beads like I do on my loop here, I could back this out and end with the flower, right? And I could have just a bunch of probably, 10 or 14, something like that, just like it's more symmetrical then, right? Because there's plenty of room here for that shank button, which my button is 17 millimeters, right? So I could do that too. So there's a couple of ways that you could decide when you're gonna stop. It really just depends on your closure, right? But do make sure that you're stopping with your smaller beads, not your center bead, right? So I'm just gonna finish it with those 2, and let me pull you down here. Okay, and so then what I'm gonna do, my friends, is I am going to take both of my cords, right, and marry them up, and I'm gonna kind of put my bracelet on my work table, and I'm going to pull everything. You don't want to pull it too tight, but I'm going to make sure everything is pretty well the way it needs to be. You don't want it to be too tight, but you don't want to have a whole bunch of slack. So again, I'm just going to kind of go, down each section of my ladder here and grab those outside beads that are below each center bead, and I'm kind of just pulling them so I can pull out any unnecessary slack. And it might be different on either side, such as mine is. There's a little more slack on one side than the other. And that's what we're looking to do. We just want to put the finishing touches on it now. And then we'll pull this together. And now what I'm going to do, because I'm using knotting cord right here, is I'm going to go ahead and do an overhanded knot, right? So let's do a regular overhanded knot here. And make sure that I get that pulled down right on top of those two beads. And then I'll pull each one individually, tighten that up a little bit, and that's what I have. And now I'm going to grab both my cords, put them together, and we'll get them through that shank there. And then we're going to just do some overhanded knots here. So we'll get that pulled down and get in one knot here. And let's get that pulled all the way down. Sorry, my fingers are in the way, guys. Trying to keep a hold of my knot here. Okay, so it's a knot there. And I'll just separate my cords, tug on that a little bit. Okay. That's what I have. And then, you know, if you want to do another knot, you absolutely can. You can put another knot in here. And then we will grab either a lighter or our thread burner, and we will singe that up. And that will make that kind of glued to each other, right? When we're singeing. When we're singeing our cord, essentially the cord just kind of creates its own glue to hold itself to itself, right? That makes sense. So I've got a couple of chunky knots in there. It's not going to be uncomfortable. It's nice, soft cording. So I feel like that's good. And I'm just going to go ahead and, oh, that one just landed way out here, didn't it? Oh my. Okay, well, we're going to cut that one off then. I thought that landed a little closer. I don't want that to be like that. So let's give that a nice trim. Okay. And there we go. Okay, and now I'll grab my thread burner. And we will just singe the ends, and again, that's just gonna make see how when you're singeing, it just, once you get the heat right next to that cording, it just kind of balls up, right? And it kind of glues itself. It creates that little ball, which kind of glues itself and adheres itself to itself. Okay, so that's what I have. And we are all done. I hope you guys enjoyed today's beadie inspiration and tutorial, making a beautiful corded goddess bracelet. That's what we've got. And I just think that's just so beautiful, and it's just, they wear so nicely on the cording. They're just, it's such a fun bracelet. Love this. I will see you guys in the next one. Have a fantastic rest of your Friday, friends. Be blessed and keep sparkling.